Hello everyone, Juxtaposition here. Today's video will be entitled The Mark of Gideon, and this refers to a Star Trek television science fiction episode concerning the Hebrew word Gideon. Now, I'm referring to the Star Trek episode that occurred was first aired in 1969, and The Mark of Gideon first aired January 17th, 1969. Now remember, that's 7 months before the Sharon Tate, Abigail Folger NATO bayonet attack in Benedict Canyon. Anyway, the television episode appeared on season 3, episode number 16. It was directed by Jude Taylor, spelled J-U-D. It was written by Stanley Slavin and Stanley Adams. George Slavin and Stanley Adams. Featured music by Fred Steiner. You do know that William Shatner was born in Quebec, Canada. He's Jewish. He was born in a Jewish household. The spelling of Shatner was changed by his paternal grandfather. Originally it was spelled S-C-H-A-T-T-N-E-R. They dropped the C, they dropped a T, they made it a shorter version, William Shatner. You know that First Officer Spock was raised Jewish in Boston, Massachusetts, and both William Shatner and Mr. Spock are about the same age. Mr. Spock, I think, is 1 week younger than Bill Shatner. Okay? Anyway, the Mark of Gideon is of course, a double and triple meaning word. So let's just discuss the word Gideon for a moment. Okay, Gideon is a Hebrew word, and it's referred to in the Bible. It also has a second meaning, which is Christian, which is Gideon's International. But the primary number one meaning for Gideon is the name of a military leader, a judge, or a prophet whose calling was to fight the Mennonites who conquered them and tormented them for 7 years. And Gideon is a masculine name referring to war hero. It's a masculine name given and a surname of Hebrew origin, which translates to feller or hewer, great warrior. It can also be interpreted as one who has a stump in the place of a hand, or one who cuts down the enemy, I guess. Anyway, then the secondary meaning for Gideon is Gideon International, which is a non-profit group of businessmen and women, the wives of Christian businessmen who want to tell you about Jesus. That's Gideon International, and I don't think that is the meaning that was used or intended for the Mark of Gideon in Star Trek. All right, now, you know, I did a video that featured Donald Pleasance, who had starred with Sharon Tate and David Niven in The Eye of the Devil. But in 1968, in January 1968, Donald Pleasance did a short 30-minute for BBC television, an episode known as Newsbenders, where it was presented that the news that you hear on television, radio, and newspapers today was scripted, planned, and formatted 5 years ago. That was the supposition presentation of the Donald Pleasance Newsbenders. Now, I completely agree with that concept, although with respect to the COVID operation, the COVID pandemic, I'm going to say that that's been in the can for a minimum of 50 years and perhaps 500 years, okay? I mean, they always, the people who run our world, which typically are associated with banking and pacification control, they have grandiose plans for population control or limiting population or depopulation or sterilization or herding the sheep in the ways that they feel that their anthropology beliefs are. So I want to read you a little bit about the plot line for the Mark of Gideon. Okay, this is in the third season of Star Trek. This is not to be confused, people, with in the first season of Star Trek they had another computer simulation show that, of course, forecasted the Aaron Valente final last words. Aaron Valente, age 33, whose last words spoken were, "It's all a game, it's a thought experiment, we're in the Matrix," meaning that we're in an artificial intelligence computer simulation world of mendacity, lies, and fraud, and that people falsely mistake lies for the truth and fake history for true history, and they believe in fake news. But before that, in 1967, we had an episode of Star Trek known as A Taste of Armageddon, where Captain Kirk and his first officer Spock have to save their ship's crew when they are declared all killed in an action of a bizarre computer simulation artificial intelligence war, where the actual deaths must nevertheless occur in an orderly fashion, where you report to an extermination chamber to be killed. In other words, there were two planets that the USS Enterprise stumbled across, and the two planets were at war with each other, but they had a treaty. It wasn't a peace treaty, it was a war treaty, where they agreed to run their war games via a computer, and that casualties would be emailed to the loser, and then they would round up people in that zip code to report to a death chamber to be exterminated. And this was neater and cleaner than actually waging war and having to clean up the mess. This made war a more sanitary version, more socially accepted form of warfare. And the Starship Enterprise stumbled across this and were declared a casualty of war. Anyway, that's called A Taste of Armageddon. It has to do with artificial intelligence, computer simulated warfare. It has to do with people reporting to extermination depopulation centers. That was in 1967, and I think that was February 1967, which preceded the Mark of Gideon by almost 2 years. All right, so getting back to the Mark of Gideon, which is mirrors COVID almost to a T. In this episode, a race of aliens all live on an overpopulated planet, and they abduct Captain Kirk under a false pretense in order to solve their problem. The episode was co-written by Stanley Adams, who portrayed Serrano Jones in the Star Trek episode Trouble with Tribbles. You may remember that Trouble with Tribbles was written by the date that night of Stephen Parent. He was going to see David Gerald when he was shot 4 times with an M16 rifle and stabbed once with the M7 bayonet by NATO soldiers at the front gate on the Cielo cul-de-sac property. Anyway, you see that William Shatner comes in and out of NATO themes, including the Sharon Tate murder. You do know there's a doppelganger twin host. The media forgot to mention that the home where Sharon Tate was murdered, there is an exact duplicate of that home just 150 feet down the ice plant from there, the next property below at 10048 Silla Drive. You have a duplication swimming pool, pool house, and main house, 3,000 square foot, one level main house, doppelganger, where you could rehearse the bayonet attack murders in the property just below the actual murder scene. And so the concept of a doppelganger applies to the Mark of Gideon and William Shatner because the captain beams down to the planet of Gideon, but instead he arrives at a doppelganger twin of the USS Starship Enterprise. without any crew members. So Captain Kirk finds himself where he thinks his coordinates took him to Gideon, but he actually is beamed to a look-alike empty United States Enterprise, whereupon he meets the daughter of the president of the prime minister of Gideon. Anyway, let me continue on. The Federation Starship Enterprise arrives at the planet Gideon to discuss diplomatic relations with this overcrowded planet. The Gideons will permit only one representative to beam down to the planet. Captain Kirk is chosen to set foot on the planet. Kirk beams down to the coordinates that they provided him, but he finds himself apparently still on board the Enterprise, which is now devoid of any of his crew members. That's because he's in the Doppelganger Hollywood set Enterprise on the planet of Gideon. First Officer Spock is informed that the captain has not yet arrived on the planet, but Gideon's ambassador, Hoden, refuses to allow a search team to investigate. Neither Starfleet Command nor Federation bureaucracy is of any help to the Enterprise, each referring the matter to each other. Does that sound like United States Congress? Kick the can down the road. Anyway, meanwhile, Captain Kirk wanders around the deserted corridors, and he notices a strange bruise on his arm. Kind of like a COVID injection, right? He eventually encounters a beautiful young woman by the name of O'Donna. O'Donna claims to have no idea how she got into this United States Enterprise Doppelganger set. She recalls only that she was living on an overcrowded auditorium and she was struggling to breathe. For a moment, O'Donna is just relieved to have the freedom of movement. Captain Kirk insists that she must be from Gideon, but O'Donna denies any knowledge of that planet. Captain Kirk learns from O'Donna that her home planet is severely overpopulated with crowds of people everywhere and there's no privacy. Kind of like Earth, right? Because death is so rare, to her privilege of being alone, even for a moment, is a dream come true. Captain Kirk is taken by her beauty, of course. The two share a passionate kiss, of course. Neither notices the image of 24 faces appearing in a viewing screen behind them as they kiss. Captain Kirk and O'Donna leave the bridge. Kirk hears strange sounds outside of his ship, which we now is a studio. He goes into a viewport and catches a glimpse of a crowd of people looking in. The scene quickly changes to the normal crew, which is orbiting in space. Kirk confronts O'Donna about what is going on, but she denies having any knowledge of what's going on. She then complains of a strange feeling, and then she faints in Captain Kirk's arm. Captain Kirk takes her to sickbay, where he encounters Ambassador Hoda instead of Bones, his medical doctor. Ambassador Bones informs him that O'Donna is actually his daughter, and she's suffering from vegan chronomeningitis. Having been infected with Captain Kirk's blood, I'm not sure how she got the blood, unless that was a heck of a French kiss, right? Anyway, he's suggesting that Captain Kirk carries a virus, which has now been transferred, I guess, through the kiss to the daughter of the ambassador, Hoden, whose daughter's name is O'Donna. Hoden's plan is then to infect the general Gideon population with this so-called virus, which will shorten their immense lifespan and relieve of the population problem on the planet of Gideon. Kurt is to supply the virus, while O'Donna's death is to serve as an inspiration for future volunteers. In other words, get your vax and be patriotic. Be a good citizen. That's this. And this is being aired in January 1969, 50 years before this actually happened in real life with the COVID pandemic. Questioned about alternatives, Hoden explains that the Gideon people's regenerative abilities would foil the sterilization attempts, and attempts at birth control would never work. Having realized that Hoden had deceived him, First Officer Spock goes against Starfleet orders and he beams down to Captain Kirk's original coordinates would be in the Doppelganger Enterprise, whereupon he finds the false Enterprise that was built to confuse Kirk. He soon reaches Kirk and O'Donnell and asks Hodum not to interfere as Officer Spock is already in enough trouble with Starship Command. Anyway, Kirk, Spock, and O'Donnell all return to the real Enterprise orbiting above Gideon, where Chief Medical Officer Dr. McCoy, Bones, treats O'Donnell's condition. O'Donnell now returns to Gideon to supply the virus herself. Captain Kirk forgives her for her deception. End of story. Does that sound like COVID? Sure does to me. Anyway, that's coming from a Jewish produced, Jewish directed, Jewish written, Jewish actor presented The Mark of Gideon, the 16th episode of the 3rd season of Star Trek. William Shatner went on to, of course, have 4 marriages, 3 of which ended in divorce. One ended in the murder of his 3rd wife, who he was in the process of divorcing. That is Noreen Elizabeth Kidd Shatner, dead at the bottom of William Shatner's swimming pool. On the 30th year anniversary of Sharon Tate's murder, which is August 9th, 1969, the year of the Mark of Gideon, Sharon Tate was murdered in Benedict Canyon. 30 years later, William Shatner's 3rd wife was murdered at the bottom of his swimming pool on August 9th, 1999. 30 years after the Mark of Gideon, 30 years after Sharon Tate's murder by NATO forces. Don't make me show you. Don't make me unsheath the M7 NATO bayonet. Here it is. This is the weapon used. Sharon Tate was stabbed 16 times with this weapon. Abigail Folger was stabbed 28 times with this weapon because she was attempting to flee the property. And Wojtek Frykowski, her control agent, was stabbed 51 times with this weapon. And you know you couldn't stab someone 51 times with just one of these, right? It's like Lay's potato chips. You're going to need 3, 4, or 5 of these to stab people 51 times. But if you have a kill team and you're in a kill box known as Cul-de-sac Cielo Drive, aka Bella Drive, aka Sunbrook Drive, aka Angelo View Drive, you have a kill team and you have a kill box. Anyway, that's my video for today. Please like and subscribe. Share my videos because I am very severely shadow banned. Thanks for listening. Take care. Bye-bye.